Greetings everyone, my name is Rejnols, and Happy New Year first and foremost. Hope you've all had some pleasant holidays and you got all the plastic that you wished for. And yeah, just had a good start to 2024. Today we're going to be talking about something that there is a lot of discussion about, which is Custodian Guards versus Custodian Wardens. When do you want one over the other? Is there one that's clearly the better choice? That is going to be the purpose of the video today. But first and foremost, if you haven't already, consider joining the Discord and come chat and hang out with all the rest of the community. It's absolutely free, link in the description below. And while you're down there, if you're new to the channel, consider hitting the subscribe button. Alright, Custodian Guards or Wardens, why do I want to talk about this today? Well, we have a data slate coming up in not too long, and then after that, 3 months or so, we will be getting a new codex. However, that still means that we have roughly 4 months of most likely going to be playing with the same rules that we have right now, but maybe some different points costs. As I've talked about in previous videos, I am assuming that the January data slate will not be changing any rules from Custodes, but will simply revert us to the points cost of the index. That means that this video should still be relevant, even if the points are wrong, because what will change is that Guard goes from 50 points to 45 points, and Wardens go from 55 points to 50. I think I flipped that. In any case, my point being, points is the only thing that's changing, is my guess, and so it shouldn't really matter. Alright, past, present, and future. We already covered the future. What about the past? Well, first and foremost, Guards was the most popular unit in Custodes because you could take them in 10-man squads. A 10-man Custodian squad is very durable. It was very efficient to use something like -1 damage stratagem, because it always felt good spending those 2 command points on, 700 points or whatever it was, because that's just good value. And even if the opponent shot their entire army into that one unit, you could revive a guy, and then by the end of all the sequencing, you'll probably still have 5 or 6 guys alive. Then came the data slate, which changed Custodian Guards to be able to be taken in a maximum of 5, which very much meant that it was not an auto-include anymore. Going down to a 5-man squad size meant that they could no longer take 2 or 3 guys with shields to tank damage. They couldn't take a Vexilla to make sure they had OC3. And generally, that was enough to kill the all-Guards build. Obviously, a 10-man squad being led by a character is also a lot better than a 5-man squad being led by a character because you got more value. And then, as I covered in the beginning of the video, the January data slate that's coming in 2 to 3 weeks will most likely not be changing any rules, so we can assume that Guards and Wardens are going to stay the exact same as they are now, and any changes that do happen to them will affect them equally, such as the 5 points they became more expensive with in the last data slate. If that is reverted, they both benefit from that equally. Alright, let's talk about the individual units real quick, starting off with the Custodian Guards, which I have been calling the glass cannon in a few videos and on the Discord. So, first and foremost, why do I call them the glass cannon? Well, they're almost exclusively focused on output. They have the standard Custodian profile for 10th edition, which is toughness 6, 2 up save, 4 up invuln, and 3 wounds. However, Custodian Guards, all of their rules are focused on output and killing. So while they are still tough, 2 up save, toughness 6, 3 wounds, all that, in the Custodes world, these are the glass cannon unit. You send them in, they deal damage, but it's not guaranteed that they survive. Their rules are they get wound rerolls of 1 all the time, and if they're on an objective and that unit controls it, then you get full wound rerolls. Now, wound rerolling for Custodes is absolutely amazing. Custodes are hitting on 2s, which means that in melee with sustained hits, that's the same as hitting every single hit on average. However, when it comes to wounding, we kinda only have one profile, which is strength 7, AP 2, damage 2, the profile of the Guardian Spear. That profile we use to deal damage to 9 out of 10 things, because our main output comes from melee, and our best melee weapon is the Guardian Spear. Now, the Guardian Spear is a very good profile, but it's not going to take down a tank by itself, because you'll be wounding on 5s. So having access to those wound rerolls is very good, because it gives you a better guarantee of killing that target. However, to get access to those wound rerolls, you need to control the objective, which is a lot harder now. You don't take Vexillas. I mean, some people take Vexillas, but in the 10-man squad, it was just an automatic inclusion to take the Vexilla because it was just 1 out of 10 models. However, now it's 1 out of 5 models, which means that you are giving away a lot of your killing output to be able to take the flag to help make sure that you're able to control those objectives. And that generally means that I don't think you can rely on going on an objective and being sure you have those wound rerolls with just one unit of Custodian Guards. Various armies have a lot of OC2 they can contest objectives with, something like Death Guard and Plague Marines, or Tyranids and all of their gargoyles. They can either completely swarm the objective or just out-OC you, and that makes it a bit harder to get access to those wound rerolls. Their second rule, which is their once per game rule, is double shooting, and this makes Custodian shooting go from okay to actually good shooting. However, once again, they kinda need those wound rerolls because the shooting is still only strength 4, so if you're shooting into Marines, the wound rerolls aren't as necessary, but if you're looking to deal any kind of damage to something that's more than toughness 4, you do kind of want to be on an objective and have access to those rerolls. Now, for the Custodian Wardens, they are among the most tanky units in the game when they get to benefit from all of their rules. And, don't get me wrong, I'm talking about a tanky unit, but we're still Custodes. That means that we are still pretty killy in melee, because everyone has that Guardian Spear we talked about. 5 attacks, strength 7, AP 2, damage 2. They still have the standard Custodian profile, but unlike the guards, their rules are focused purely on defense. Now, there is one downside to the Custodian Wardens compared to the Custodian Guards, and that is if you're not running a character with the Wardens, they don't get access to their first rule, which is -1 to wound against higher strength weapons. Now, this is obviously an amazing ability to have on something that is toughness 6. Toughness 6 is a very nice breakpoint because a lot of weapons are strength 9 or strength 10. Meaning they would normally wound you on 3s, but now that goes to 4s because the strength is higher than the toughness of the Wardens. And that is what we're seeing in the game right now. It's a lot of strength 10, damage 3 shots, or even melee. And even against last cannons, or strength 12 melee, -1 to wound is still very good because, taking it from a 2 to wound to a 3 to wound. And most things that are strength 12 only come with 1 or 2 shots. Or in melee, it might be like, 5 or 6 attacks from a big guy. So that -1 to wound against the big guns and the big heavy hitters is actually really, really big. Now, in math terms, it's only an increase of 16.6% in durability when you don't account for rerolls or anything else than that. But it's when you start stacking those defensive things that things get wild. If you are new to 40k, I'm not gonna go super crazy into math, but there will be some math examples. But just keep in mind that stacking either offensive or defensive abilities on top of each other is actually just bonkers. It gets crazy with the amount of durability or even offensive output you can get when you stack things on top of each other, and we're gonna have some examples of that later on. Their other ability is the 4+ Feel No Pain once per game. Now, the math here is a little bit important, so I am gonna go through it. So, if we start off with -1 to wound, that is, as I said before, in theory, an increase of 16.66% because your opponent goes from a 2 to a 3 or from a 3 to a 4 to wound you. This obviously only matters if the opponent's strength is higher than your defense, but let's just pretend that that is the case. Then we factor in the 4-up invulnerable save. We'll assume they're shooting us with AP 3 and we're in cover or whatever. That will bring us to the 4-up invuln, which is a 50% chance of saving, which again, basically means a 50% increase in durability. We then take the 4-up Feel No Pain on top of that, and assuming it's damage 3, there is a 75% chance we will save one of those 3 dice, meaning we only take 2 damage, effectively meaning that another wound needs to go through to kill one guy. If you're not into math, I can sum this up as saying that Custodian Wardens are hella tanky, and your opponent, if they haven't played against Wardens before, might be surprised about how much they actually need to put into these guys to remove them from the table. However, it's the dice game, of course. Some games, you're just gonna fail all your 4-up invuln saves, and that'll throw the math off. That's just how dice games go. But I'm hoping to show you that all of these things stacking on top of each other really gives Custodian Wardens a durability that's just very hard to match or even beat by any army. Now, the weakness of this 4-up Feel No Pain ability comes in the timing of when to use it, because you have to use it at the start of the shooting phase or the start of the fight phase. That means that if you misposition your wardens in a way where your opponent doesn't have to shoot at them and can choose to shoot something else, you're now sitting in that dilemma of, do I pop the 4-up Feel No Pain to make sure my guys survive, or do I not pop it, giving my opponent a choice to either shoot the wardens or something else? And that's something you'll get experience with as you play, but it is something to keep in mind. When you're throwing out a warden unit for your opponent to shoot at, try and make it so that they're the only unit they can shoot at, or rather that the majority of the army can only shoot at that warden unit, because otherwise your opponent might just say, well, I'm not going to shoot your wardens because they have the 4-up Feel No Pain, I'm just going to shoot the other stuff. Alright, we've talked a bit about guards and wardens now. Let's talk about some quick negatives and positives for both of the units. Positives first and foremost. For the Custodian Guard, they obviously have the best offensive power and output. Nothing else in the Custodes army can put out as much damage as these guys. Between double shooting, wound rerolls, and their points cost, they beat everything else. I actually haven't done the math for how many Terminators you need to equal the output of Custodian Guards. But Custodian Guards gets rerolls against everything, whereas the Alaris only gets it against characters, monsters, and vehicles, and blah blah blah. With all that in mind, on average, Custodian Guard is the best offensive power / output unit. And they're also the cheapest model. Well, except for Sisters of Silence and Sagittarum, but neither of those are gonna do nearly as much as Custodian Guards, so in the case of talking about viable units, Custodian Guards are the best at output for the point cost. For the Custodian Wardens, they are far and away the most tanky Custodes unit. And again, there is a little bit of dice luck because 4+ on Feel No Pains and 4+ on Invulnerable saves. But because you're stacking those two together and with -1 to wound and then potentially -1 damage, things get really crazy. All of a sudden, a damage 3 shot goes to damage 2 because of -1 damage, and then a 4-up Feel No Pain means on average you take 1 damage from a damage 3 shot. Effectively meaning that your opponent needs 3 damage 3 shots to get through to kill 1 model, and that's pretty crazy. And they can also take the Vexilla for absolutely free. They can still use a flag and have a spear so they don't lose anything, compared to Custodian Guards that needs to give up one of their offensive models to take the shield and flag. Negative for Custodian Guards. Well, as we just talked about, they have great offense output, but they don't have any defensive output, defensive abilities, except for -1 damage, which is still very good. But -1 damage with -1 wound and a 4-up Feel No Pain is really good, and -1 damage with a 4-up Invulnerable save is, good, but not nearly good enough. And that just in general means that they cannot stand out in the open and survive. On top of that, they kinda need to fight stuff that's on an objective, and in Warhammer 40K that is totally possible, but your opponent can be putting chaff in front of them that they need to chew through first. Or they can just be holding the objective with the chaff, and yes, you will kill that chaff, you will annihilate it. But you've spent, 250 points to kill, let's just say 80 points of chaff, and then those guys are dead. For Custodian Wardens, you are required to have a character with them to get the full potential, because that's the only way you get access to that -1 to wound ability. On top of that, the 4-up Feel No Pain timing can be hard to learn if you're a new player or just competitively not used to it. It'll take some getting used to, which can be a negative because it's a bit hard. And then finally, Wardens are more expensive than Guards by 5 points per model. In general, Custodes are overcosted anyway, but let's say that points costs are going down in the data slate. That might impact how many points you have left over to take chaff units, and taking Wardens might allow you to not bring as many Prosecutors or Witch Seekers as if you were taking Custodian Guard. So I think that is a negative that is worth pointing out, but I don't think it's a big deal. Now it is time for some math, because I can say a lot of things, and some people are going to be like, oh yeah, sounds good to me, and other people are going to be like, no, Guards are better for sure. Or no, Wardens are better for sure. But you know what never lies? It is average math. So we know for sure in offense that Guards are better, but by how much are they better? First and foremost, we assume the Guards have access to their full wound rerolls, fighting on an objective, just because that's the most fair thing to do. We're only accounting for melee because shooting for Custodes is relevant, but it's not super relevant. We're also assuming that both units will be using Slayer of Nightmares stratagem when relevant, and in general, both units are going to be using the sustained hits karate. Alright, so looking at Marine equivalent unit, that means a toughness 4, 2 wound, 3-up save model. 5 Custodian Guards will kill 15 of these guys, whereas 5 Wardens will kill 11. In this case, it's just a tie. Why do I say it's a tie despite guards having more kills? Well, I mean, a Marine unit will be a maximum of 10 models. Well, like it could be 11 with a leader. But they both kill the Marine unit by itself, and they're both overkilling it. So in that case, I say it's a tie. Against a Terminator equivalent unit, that means toughness 5, 2 up save, 4 up invuln, 3 wounds. 5 guards are going to kill 5 Terminators and deal 2 damage, whereas 5 Wardens are only going to kill 4 Terminators. So guards take this one, no question asked. Or no question about it, rather. If there's a 5-man Terminator unit, you can send guards into them and expect them to kill that unit, whereas Wardens will need to get lucky to kill that unit. Against a Dreadnought, where we're using Slayer of Nightmares, 5 guards will deal 18 damage, which is the same as killing 1 Dreadnought and then dealing 6 damage, whereas the Wardens will just on average kill 1 Dreadnought. In this case, I will give the win to the guards because Wardens only exactly kill a Dreadnought. When I say Dreadnought, by the way, I'm thinking of the Redemptor pattern Dreadnought, not accounting for -1 damage, but just, the Brutalis or the Ballistus, which are toughness 10, 12 wounds, 2 up save. Because the Wardens only, on average, barely kills the Dreadnought, it only takes 1 dice being off for you to not kill that Dreadnought, whereas the guards have a little bit more wiggle room because they deal 6 damage in addition to what they need to kill it, meaning that you have more dice that you can be unlucky with before you fail to kill the Dreadnought. Alright, now we're doing the same examples, but now we're adding in Armor of Contempt. This is a very normal stratagem to see because it's in every single Space Marine detachment. Chaos Space Marines have it, Votann have a version of it, and I'm sure other factions also have a version of it I'm just forgetting about. In any case, reducing AP by 1, very common ability to see. So again, the math is completely the same, but we're doing that Armor of Contempt, which results in guards killing 11 Marines, so we're still overkilling them, but Wardens are only killing 8 Marines, which means that we don't kill that 10-man unit we're thinking about. For the Terminators, neither of the units kill a 5-man Terminator unit. Guards kill 3 Terminators and deal 2 damage, whereas Wardens kill 2 Terminators and deal 2 damage. And then finally, against the Dreadnought, using Slayer of Nightmares, the guards will on average deal 12 damage, whereas the Wardens will on average only deal 8 damage. So, as expected, as I talked about, we know guards are better offensively, but by how much? And I think that is kind of where the important discussion needs to be had. Because if we go back to the previous slide, we can see against Marine equivalent units, both of these overkill the unit. Against Terminators, the difference is between leaving the unit alive with 1 model or overkilling the unit with 2 damage. And against a Dreadnought, they are both killing the units. When we take Armor of Contempt into account, then only the guards are able to kill the Marine equivalent unit. They both fail to kill the 5-man Terminator unit, and the guards are just barely able to kill the Dreadnought equivalent. But again, as I said before with the example that wasn't using Armor of Contempt for the Wardens, only 1 dice needs to go wrong here, on average, for you to not kill the Dreadnought. And if we assume it's a Redemptor Dreadnought, which is what everyone is using right now, both units fail to kill the Dreadnought, because the guards would deal 6 damage and the Wardens would deal 4 damage. With all of that in mind, what is my thoughts of guards versus Wardens? I think it's pretty clear for me personally that I think survivability is more important in the game right now. And because of that, I generally think you are better off taking Wardens over Custodian Guards. Wardens are just in an all-around example that I can think of the better choice. The output of Wardens are lower than Guards, as we just talked about, but it's not so much lower that it feels terrible. Right, so you're not killing that Dreadnought in one go, which the Guard have a chance of doing, but again, you just need that 1 dice to go wrong, and then the guards are no longer killing that Armor of Contempt Dreadnought. In that case, I'd rather have a more durable unit being stuck in combat than a more squishy unit that didn't even manage to kill that Dreadnought. Because if you imagine you're still in combat, the Dreadnought falls back, and everything just shoots at that thing that charged the Dreadnought, the guards are dead like 9 out of 10 times, whereas the Wardens actually have a good chance of surviving that. Because the Wardens are just so much more durable than guards. It's pretty crazy. I did a quick example here with an exocrine shooting at them, and I'm not gonna go through the entire math, but in short, an exocrine shooting Custodian Guards will kill 2 of them every single time, and shooting into Wardens, it'll kill 1 of them. Now, this is just one exocrine. You need to think about, if 2 exocrine and 2 maleceptors and blah, 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 all this stuff is shooting at them. The Wardens just come out of top by so much. It's a little bit crazy. Because if you also pop -1 damage and a 4-up Feel No Pain, as we talked about earlier, a damage-free shot that goes through the invuln and after saving with Feel No Pains and all of that, it deals 1 damage. That means that, on average, your opponent would need 2 or maybe even 3 exocrines to shoot at Wardens to guarantee kill a model. Again, this is example. We're playing a dice game. The opponent could be rolling, a lot more shots. But it's pretty crazy to think that a Warden needs 3 exocrine shots to go through the invuln and the Feel No Pain to kill it. Whereas for the Custodian Guards, if they use -1 damage, they need 2 of them to go through the invuln save, and that's it. They're dead for sure. Now, just because I think that Wardens are better in general, it doesn't mean that Guards are not viable. I just think that it requires a different playstyle and a different game plan than what I think is, I'm not gonna say the best choice for Custodes right now, but the general choice for Custodes right now. We can kill most things when we get into melee. The issue isn't making sure we kill the thing we come in contact with. The issue is surviving the trip there. And with Guards, you will be able to, of course, stage behind a wall and do that charge, and then you kill that one thing, but then chances are that unit is 100% gone. If you do the same thing with Wardens, you stage, you charge the thing, maybe you don't kill it, but you should have dealt enough damage to it or taking enough models away from the unit that you now have control of that objective or whatever it is you need to do. And then yes, your opponent can fall back and shoot at your Wardens, but then the Wardens have the 4-up Feel No Pain, basically guaranteeing them that they will survive until the next turn, which means they can once again either take an objective, do an action, charge something, and then after that they maybe die. And then again, it depends on just what kind of player you are. How do you play the game? How do you approach it? In my opinion, in let's just say 8 out of 10 scenarios, I'd rather have Wardens than I would have Custodian Guard. Let's quickly round off this video talking about characters to use for Custodian Guard versus Custodian Wardens, but honestly, it doesn't really matter too much. They can both use the same characters to basically the same effect. A Blade Champion is obviously more killy with Guards because he gets access to the wound reroll, which is very nice for his devastating wounds profile, but both units benefit greatly from being able to reroll advances and reroll charges, and once per game advance and charge. Both units can use that very, very nicely because, as I said, we don't struggle with whatever we're fighting in melee, we struggle with getting into melee. Or we struggle mostly with getting into melee. And having access to that reroll advances and once per game advance and charge means that you can get where you want to get a lot easier. Shield Captains, you could argue that Wardens benefit more from the -1 damage because it pairs up with the 4-up Feel No Pain so very nicely, but they both obviously benefit from being able to get a free stratagem. You could also argue that double karate is more valuable for the Wardens because if you're taking sustained hits and lethal hits to make sure you kill something, you're kind of wasting the wound reroll ability of the Guards, but then you can also argue that the Guards can have access to sustained hits and being -1 to hit in melee. So, that again, I think they benefit somewhat equally there. For Trajan Valoris, I think is where the biggest difference is because Trajan is very much a counter-charge threat in my opinion. You put it on an objective and then you say, come charge me, I'm gonna fight first. Or if they're not charging that unit, then you can charge something, pop 12 attacks with Trajan, and most likely just murder whatever it is. Obviously, again, with wound rerolls from Guards, he becomes absolutely crazy, but I think that's just overkill most of the time. I'd rather have him be there to say, oh, if you just shoot at me, I'm using my 4-up Feel No Pain and -1 damage, and you're not gonna kill me. And if you are charging me, well then I'm popping my fight first, and I'm probably gonna kill most of that unit you just charged me with. And then the following turn, I might pop my 4-up Feel No Pain, making myself even more tanky. So I think for Trajan specifically, also because he's so expensive and you need to get the value out of his ability, I think Trajan is a lot better with Wardens than he is with Guards. And then finally, I think I need to mention Kyria Draxus. A lot of people are very hyped about the combo of being able to shoot indirectly and rerolling wounds and blah blah blah. I played one game with it. I think it was fine. I think people are overvaluing it a little bit. What I will say is that Kyria Draxus is a great choice if you absolutely want to run Custodian Guards. Very cheap choice, 75 points. gets a lot of benefits from being in Custodian Guards, gives the Custodian Guards some benefits, but I don't think the combo itself is something that you need to take. It's more like, if you want to take Custodian Guards, Kyria Draxus is a good choice to put with the guards. I'm also a little bit curious, let me know in the comments below, but are people thinking that the Devastating Wounds gun from Kyria Draxus is indirect? Because I feel like people might be doing that. A lot of people are like, oh, I'm just putting them behind a wall and then I'm doing like, 6 mortal wounds on average and it's awesome. And I'm just like, but you can only do that if you're within 18 inches. And if you're within 18 inches, well, then you're within being shot range, because that's the rule you get with Kyria Draxus. So I'm a little bit confused there, where people are like thinking about, maybe I'm just misunderstanding what people are saying. In any case, I think Kyria Draxus is a fine combo. I'm just not entirely sold on it compared to taking, say, an Eversor Assassin. Because that's another thing you need to keep in mind when you take Kyria Draxus, is that she takes up one of those 2 Agents of the Imperium slots you get. So you can take Caladius Assassin and an Eversor Assassin, or you could take Caladius Assassin and Kyria Draxus, for example. In any case, that is going to round off this video talking about Custodian Guards and Wardens. As the game looks right now, that 4-up Feel No Pain on the Wardens are just so incredibly valuable to make sure you survive 1 round of shooting, or 1 round of melee, and guards just don't have access to it. Yes, they can get access to -1 to hit and -1 damage, but as we talked about, it's when you stack all of those things together that things get crazy tanky, right? And in shooting, the only thing guards can get access to is the -1 damage, whereas Wardens can get access to -1 to wound, -1 damage, and the 4-up Feel No Pain. But of course, that is just my opinion. Let me know in the comments below what you are running in general. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to hit the subscribe button. And yeah, as I said at the start, I hope you had a good beginning to 2024, and I'll see you in the next one.